I have one, very significant one. I know we're going to have this, we've asked this gentleman to come to a school board or school committee meeting in the future to be acknowledged, but you probably saw in the paper this past week that Stephen King of our community recently donated $50,000 through the Ipswich Strings Society and the IEF to be used to purchase high-end orchestral instruments for our lead chairs, if you will, in each section of the orchestra. So I just wanted to acknowledge that donation and Steve's significant generosity. There was a very nice article written in the newspaper this past week about that. So kudos and much thanks to Steve King and the IEF. I see Kim Roberti's out here in the audience, and Amy Borgman, who head up the Ipswich Strings Society. So thank you to them for orchestrating all of that, no pun intended.
Yeah, I'll echo that. You know, Steve, some of us know Steve personally. You know, Steve has 5 kids in the district. His oldest is a freshman. And then they kind of all filter down from there. But he's been beyond generous over the years. This is obviously a significant gift that's fairly public, but he's always been sort of behind the scenes helping out the schools anytime help was needed. So again, just an awesome gift to the district and a gift that'll last in perpetuity for, to benefit future generations of students. So we're all very thankful for Steve's gift. Any other special acknowledgements? Emily. 2
quick ones. Choral Fest last week was amazing, absolutely phenomenal. The choral teachers and the kids were just absolutely knocked it out of the park. It was just, everybody was really impressed. And then last night was the ballroom dance gala for the 5th graders at Winthrop, and it was, again, absolutely amazing. The kids were amazing. The teachers who danced were absolutely amazing, and it was just a really, really nice time. And both events were really great to see everybody come together and be back and doing something normal. And it was just awesome, and it was awesome for the community, I think. So
I got to see them working on that and showing it to the school yesterday during the day, and it was incredible.
Yeah.
Watching it.
Yeah, I think just about every boy looked like they were like wearing razor blades under their clothes,
Yeah.
but by the end of it, they were all very happy they did it. But it was great.
Yeah, it's a really cool event. Okay, citizens' comments? No citizens' comments. Caroline is not here tonight. Did you want to read the high school representative report?
Yes. I have Caroline's report in front of me, so I'm just going to read it into the record. Hello, Ipswich school community. Below are the happenings at the Ipswich High School, as well as a summary of the opinions of Ipswich high schoolers regarding the nude mask optional policy. Clubs and sports. Many students are enjoying intramural volleyball at the moment as they transition from the winter to spring sports seasons. Spring sports are beginning to meet about the upcoming season and will begin practicing shortly. The season actually starts on Monday. The Green Team is continuing to plan a community garden dinner in the garden in front of the high school that is set for May 14th. Regarding masks, 150 students responded to the poll that Caroline sent out to the high school. About 75% of the students selected that they feel fine with not having masks. 17 to 18% of the students said that they feel good about no longer having masks. And 8% of the students said that they do not feel good about no longer having masks. Many students at first felt uncomfortable and overwhelmed with the idea of removing their masks right after vacation, considering that there's usually been a spike in cases after vacations. However, many students now feel comfortable and happy to no longer wear their masks, and they're delighted to be able to see their teachers and schoolmates' faces once again. At the same time, there are still some students, about 8%, who feel mildly to very unsafe coming to school, where most students are not wearing masks, some because they're at high risk or they live with people that are high risk. Overall, it feels great to feel a sense of normalcy again. And that poll was conducted on March 6th of 2022. Thank you, Caroline Jepson.
Great. Good report. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have Sarah Player and Gary Champion here to talk to us about Articles 18 and 19 on the town warrant regarding the Town Government Study Committee. Sarah, you are up.
Hey, everybody. Sarah, thanks. Sarah Player, 45 Mile Lane. I'm here tonight as the chair of the Ad Hoc Government Study Committee. So back in the fall, town meeting created an ad hoc committee to take a closer look at the Government Study Committee bylaw. So the town meeting created a six-person committee. So the two current members of the Government Study Committee, Craig Saline and Gary Champion. I was the representative from the Select Board. Emily Smith was the representative from the FinCom. And then we had two at-large members, Todd Wilson and Bill Kraft, who both had experience previously with town government. So we've been looking at the bylaw for a few months, and in front of you, you have our revised version. So we have both Article 18, which drafts the bylaw, and the 19 appoints the town meeting members. So Article 18 takes a look at the establishment and membership. Do you guys have a copy of the
No.
in your packet?
We have the warrant article here.
Okay, yeah.
Where?
Well, I just looked it up on the town website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll give you a second maybe to pull it up, just so we're talking about the same thing. So the first paragraph speaks about the membership of the committee. So we are proposing a 5-person government study committee, and our committee decided to kind of broaden out the appointing authority to make sure the committee was representative of the town. So as it stands, the current draft is there would be a select board designee. That could be a select board member or a designee. The school committee and the finance committee would also appoint either a member of their own or a designee. And then the other two members would be appointed from town meeting, at-large citizens. So we're proposing a five-member committee. So we also, because there was a lot of discussion about those town meeting appointments, that in the past, with the FinCom appointments, it sometimes appears that they're self-appointing members. So we decided that the committee would be responsible for posting those vacancies 60 days ahead, so citizens would be aware of any vacancies that were coming up for the two town meeting appointments. And that we would work with the town moderator to make sure people knew, there were openings. And in the event that two people didn't volunteer at town meeting or town meeting failed to appoint, that those last two appointments would be made by a town moderator, and then any second vacancy by the town manager. Just making sure that we would have a 5-person committee. So as far as the responsibilities of the committee, the hottest topic that we discussed was the referral process. Who brings these referral topics to the ad hoc committee? So the majority of our members felt like the select board and town meeting were the two best avenues for referral topics to kind of streamline the process. So town meeting, of course, could, as they did in the fall, create, refer something to government study committee for further review, or the select board could kind of organize topics for this committee. So we would want the government study committee to also make annual reports back to town meeting and the select board with whatever their research topics were that they were covering. But we also wanted the committee to kind of do a periodic broad review of the charter and bylaws. As an example, a couple of years ago, they did a review of things like gender neutral language. So if a topic comes up and we want the committee to kind of take a broad look through a specific lens, or just a broad lens actually through, they could do that as well, and then bring forward to the select board or town meeting those recommendations for bylaw changes, just to make sure the charter and bylaw continues to be updated and be timely. And the final component is a quorum, that the government study committee shall consist of no fewer than 3 members. So that's the bylaw as it's written in front of you. So when we took some final edits, the final vote on our bylaw was 5-1 in favor. So Gary was the dissenting vote, so he can speak to some of the concerns that he had. Are there any questions? So I brought this before you because we of course made you guys an appointing authority. Well, we feel like you have a significant part of the budget. You have big topics that you tackle, and we thought the top, the big 3 boards in town should put forward a member or a designate. So we realize that you have a lot of subcommittee work, so you could always designate someone instead of an actual school committee member if you so choose.
So just to clarify, the way it's written, or the way you propose it be written, the select board is essentially the gatekeeper for items that will be reviewed by the government study committee. So if the finance committee had an issue,
Correct.
they would get approval. They'd have to get the okay from the select board to have.
Unless it happened at town meeting, right? So if an issue
Yep.
happened at town meeting, where the FinCom's sitting and we're all sitting,
Yep.
And there was a discussion of topics. We just thought it was important that that the select board, as the executive board, kind of is like a clearinghouse of topics.
Yep.
Because we felt it important that the government study committee isn't tackling an individual's concerns. It's representing concerns of the town or the collective.
Mhm.
And so we thought town meeting is the ultimate collective of all the citizens, and the select board is elected to represent the collective.
Okay.
And I mean, citizens come to select board with concerns now that often become warrant articles.
Okay.
So we felt like that was a clearer path. So the committee would have clear referral avenues.
Mhm. Okay.
And of course, an individual citizen could write their own citizen petition at town meeting as well,
Mhm.
which is actually how we created this ad hoc committee in the fall.
Okay, got it.
So,
Great.
yeah, we just thought it was, give it some, some structure.
Yep. Any questions for Sarah?
Sure.
Gary, did you want to say a few words?
Hello, Gary Champion, 3 Palomino Way. Been on the Town Government Study Committee for 5 years. Served with Sarah on the ad hoc committee to review this. And I'll begin by saying that this bylaw is far superior to what the select board proposed last October. But I do have concerns that it was the dissenting vote, so I can have the right to raise concerns. Not saying how I'm going to vote at town meeting, but I thought it was important to at least express that. So if I may, the December 1962 town meeting unanimously voted to establish the permanent Town Government Study Committee as an autonomous advisor to town meeting on town government. The Town Government Study Committee process has been transparent, public, collaborative, and productive. No one has produced a valid reason to change what takes place. Town Council claimed in 2020 the town manager can dissolve the Town Government Study Committee at will, which overrules town meeting and is false. Those are the types of things that I've seen in my 5-year term on this committee that was never really addressed. The select board then shut down the Town Government Study Committee by failing to make appointments. There's only 2 members left. We can't have a quorum. We haven't been in business for a year. The select board then developed with town council a town government study committee bylaw that empowered the select board with control over the town government study committee agenda. That's what failed at town meeting in October. It was spoken that, democracy comes from below, not from above. It was voted down. So the Town Government Study Committee bylaw before you tonight, as I say, is far superior. Sarah explained multiple appointing authorities, which eliminates the delusion that the select board is in control of the committee that had been perceived by some. However, it was expressed at multiple meetings on this subject that the language, empowers the select board as the gatekeeper over town government study committee topics, and that implies also what the town government study committee may or may not recommend at town meetings. I ask that you think about that. Does that mean, for example, that the school committee, who, if this passes, will appoint a school committee member or someone that you feel is capable to the town government study committee, perhaps that person reports to the school committee on what's been taking place, and the school committee says, you know, we've always thought that the town government would be made better by this. And you bring that, and that you can't have the government study committee work on that unless the select board approves it. Does that really make sense? You feel it's important, you feel it's worthwhile to look at, but the select board can say no. I don't think that's what the citizens of Ipswich intended this committee to be. And that would be the same, the gatekeeper phrase, for the finance committee, who if this passes, will appoint one of their own or another citizen to the town government study committee. That would be the same for the planning board, the zoning board, commissions, committees, all town officials can't give something to the town government study committee to work on unless the select board approves. That has not been what has taken place over the years. We've gotten topics from town managers, we've gotten topics from past and current select board members, we've gotten topics from citizens, so I'm troubled by the term gatekeeper. So a couple more thoughts. What I've learned in 5 years on the town government study committee is that the select board members are not experts on governance. They have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of things they got to pay attention to. They don't deep dive into the subject of town governments like the town government study committee. That's all we do. So they're not experts on it. You know, I've run into cases where a select board member didn't know what a quorum is. You see? But what do you do with that? Well, you go to state authorities and you get the specific definition on what a quorum is, and now we all know. And that's one of the roles of the town government study committee. I've also learned, and I mean this, I'm trying not to be disrespectful to this, but it's hard. I've learned that the select board relies on town council. Relies on town council. And we all need to be adults here and realize there is a political reason for that. And they rely on town council despite town government study committee research proving town council is wrong. I mean, not town government study committee's opinions. I'm talking about state authorities, state opinions, facts, research, history, proving that town council is wrong and it was ignored. That should upset and concern everybody. So I just asked the school committee to think about these things. I really want the town government study committee to get back to work. We've been out of business for a year. There's a lot of stuff that we can do to continue to make better government. I intend to seek appointment by town meeting at the May town meeting. I'm hoping to get people's votes. Keep me on this committee and get back to work and serve the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
So just wondering if there are any feedback or any edits on the bylaw that you see.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
I'm sort of reading through this and listening to what Gary had said. Is it true that the select board would be the final decider of what gets reviewed? Because I don't see that sort of stated. Maybe I'm
So that first
not
sentence,
interpreting
the
it.
first sentence under responsibilities, it says the select board and town meeting
Yeah.
will refer topics.
Right.
Right. To the committee for review. So the government study committee is a research body, an advisory body. So the thought, and we had a lot of conversation, probably the most conversation about that particular line, the referral process. How do those topics get there? Can individuals make referral topics? Can all the boards make referral topics? And the committee discussed that at length, and our thought was, because the select board is the executive board, and we want the topics to be, we don't want the committee to be going off in 15 different directions, that it would be appropriate for the select board to kind of be the clearinghouse in making sure that we're giving topics that are concerned by the town. Now, town meeting is its own, that was one of the areas of weakness that we thought in the previous bylaw, that there wasn't a really clear path from town meeting directly to the government study committee. But there is. It's clearly written down, so town meeting can also just say, like it did in October,
Okay.
we'd like you to take a look at this bylaw closer. And whenever an issue comes up at town meeting, a citizen can make the motion, we'd like to refer this to government study committee, a board could make that recommendation. Anytime a topic, I think, starts to get debated at length at town meeting, oftentimes citizens or boards will say, hey, maybe we need to put the brakes on and take a closer look at this.
And we need a simple majority to be referred in town meeting?
I believe it is a simple majority. For an article, a topic to be
Yeah.
moved, I believe it is a simple. I don't think it's a 2/3 vote. I think it's a simple majority.
Excuse me.
If I may, one of the things that I pushed for was the town government study committee making an annual report to town meeting. Here's who we are, here's what we're working on, here's what we think is important, what do you guys think? Okay, and then I don't think there could be a vote there would be a vote to accept the report under parliamentary procedure, but there wouldn't necessarily, and then citizens can come to the mic and say, I've always thought citizens' queries, there should be answers to citizen queries. Why do we go to town meetings, public meetings, and ask questions and nothing ever happens? Maybe that's going to be a real important point. Well, we take that back and we say, that seemed like something everybody was really hot on. Let's focus in on that. But I don't think there would actually be a vote.
But no, I think what Bob's saying is, as in your, the suggestion that you made in October to create an ad hoc committee, send a topic to a government study committee topic would be a simple majority. That's not a 2/3 vote.
Oh, simple majority.
Yeah, that's a simple
If there
majority, yes.
wasn't a vote at all, there's no 2/3 because
Okay.
it's not
Right.
changing how things go.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
So what was wrong with the government study committee before? It's been there since '62, so
We had a
60 years, right?
So what's currently on the books for the bylaw is one line, create, and it says back in 1962, create a government study committee and the select board should appoint them. And that's it. There was no discussion of the work that was done, the process, and the committee's had a hard time recruiting and maintaining members, so we thought if it's a committee that does a lot of important work, and we should add some structure around their work, so that interested citizens could take a look and say, what does this committee actually work on? Because right now, there's nothing in the bylaw
They
that
study
says,
government.
right.
I would, just going back to the gatekeeper function, so absent the town meeting avenue to bring issues to the committee to review,
Right.
it seems like this committee would sort of function as a subcommittee of the select board. But, which would be, I see the conflict that you're talking about, but this town meeting avenue also, the select board wouldn't have the ability to then block what was voted on at town meeting. It would in
Of
fact be
course.
an independent avenue to.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that the conversation that we had was the select board is supposed to represent the people. And if they're not doing their job, they should be removed from the select board.
But if the school committee had like an issue,
Of course.
we could at town meeting ask that.
Or you'd ask, the chairs would ask
Right.
each other. I
But if there was some.
I think this is codifying what's currently happening.
Right.
Right, that's where they're getting their topics today from the select board and town meeting. We're just actually writing down what actually happens.
Great.
So,
Any other questions? All right.
so will you guys be taking a vote tonight on
Not
these?
tonight.
or-
I think we'll do them all
Okay.
on our next
Okay.
meeting, April 7th.
Okay, so
We'll
let me
take
just quickly speak about the final
Oh, sure.
warrant article
Yep.
that's connected to this. In the event that Article 18 is passed it allows for those 2 town meeting appointments to take place. So what we did with Article 19 was allow town meeting to, in the event that 18 is passed, to appoint 2 members at town meeting. Once all of these articles go through, go to the state to be approved, those members would then be active members, instead of waiting until October for the next town meeting to appoint those other 2 members. So that just, allows interested parties to be appointed at town meeting right then. So we will be posting those vacancies, assuming they become available ahead of town meeting.
Great.
Through the local news, on the town website, just so people who are interested will have some information about, what the government study does. They could then follow up and, write a letter to the local news about their interest or their qualifications. They could stand up at town meeting and say, I'm so-and-so, I'm interested in this, these are my qualifications.
So, Sarah,
Yeah.
if Article 18 does not pass,
Article 19 doesn't come to the table.
doesn't come to the table.
Right.
Okay.
And so then it reverts back to the current bylaw on the
Right.
books, which is appointment only by the select board. Right.
So the town meeting would then just say that to table Article 19 at the meeting? I'm just thinking of the wording and the process for
Right.
that to happen, because you're going to have a vote on Article 18.
Right.
And if it passes, you just automatically go to Article 19. If it fails, then
Yes, I
somebody
don't know
makes
if
a
they
motion.
definitely postpone 19. You wouldn't, it's defunct at that
I'm
point.
wondering if the language in Article 19 should say, in the event that...
In the summary?
No, actually, in the article.
Yep.
In the article itself, and again, that would be run by town council.
Moderator.
But the moderator for the language, but I'm wondering if it should say, if Article 18 passes,
Okay, I can ask that.
shall the town vote to appoint?
Yeah. Town council has already reviewed both of these, but I can ask if that would help clarify it. Yep.
Okay, anything
Right,
else for
so-
Sarah or Gary? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to debrief of our Finance Committee budget presentations from last week, which feels like a year ago.
It was a long week.
I thought I'll start. I was really impressed with the presentations from our new elementary school principals. I thought they did an awesome job, especially for their first time. I thought they were really well prepared, answered all the questions, and I think they came across very well, and I think the Finance Committee members were pretty impressed with them. I think they did a great job kind of laying out the needs at both the elementary schools, and again, I think the Finance Committee really saw those needs and appreciated them, and but overall, the administrator presentations went very well with, quite honestly, very few questions. I expected more. But again, I think they all did a great job kind of showing the needs in each of the schools and explaining why and what the budgets represented. I thought the format, Cheryl, was great. I thought it was much easier. Kind of pulling those one slides out with all the additions was a much easier way to kind of illustrate what's different from last year. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts. No?
Not really.
So, having been to a lot of these, that went as smoothly as it can go.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have, generally speaking, FinCom that understands our situation, supports our plans, and their questions were more around the details and timing issues rather than the philosophy of the multi-year override and the needs that we've expressed as needing to be met in the new budget. So most of the detailed questions were for clarity rather than for contesting issues. And so that's always a good sign. So I think we're in good stead. It's really going to be, for us, it's going to be down to whether or not the strategy that we're taking now to have an override this year will get their support, because we are doing it with some comfort measure. And but I think they understand that this is something that has to happen, and that there's some reason why we're approaching it this year as opposed to in the future, and I think they understand that. And that's whether or not we have more stabilization or have other funds available or whatever. I think that they all, that's almost moot. It's almost like we're taking a deliberate and well thought out step to make our situation successful for the long term. And so I think that almost everyone on that committee reflected supporting the concept, and that's what we want.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts?
I agree, and I credit that to school committees in years past, just laying out this plan, and now they sort of understand this is the way the funding model works, and it's, it wasn't a big, so maybe the enrollment was surprised. It was a surprise, but the expectation that, it's kind of.
I mean, I think they always want more data, particularly around student achievement, and there really isn't that much now because of the pandemic, and so that's challenging. And I think that big picture, we can't ask for better than we got in terms of their feedback. So we're in good shape. We just have to be clear. I think we need to be clear as a committee in the future too that we're following our template, and that we're not adding. Most of their anxiety was around added positions that don't go away, right? And we're in a situation now where with these stabilization funds and ESSER funds and so forth, we're adding positions that theoretically should go away with the funding. And if we demonstrate a year or two from now that we're pruning some of those things, that'll go a long way to making us more credible when we're presenting our budgets. And so it reduces the friction in future budget years.
Okay, Emily?
I think one thing, and I agree with everything that's been said, and I was really impressed with the budget presentations. Everybody did just a phenomenal job. I question how much they're aware that what's going on in the schools now is very different than what was happening a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago when their kids were in school. And I understand they want to tie some of these positions to temporary funding, but the need might exceed the funding. And that's because of the pandemic, and that's because the makeup from the pandemic is not going to be a year. It's going to happen, but it's going to happen over a longer period of time than we're probably comfortable with or expecting. And I think just listening, again, budget's not my strong suit, but listening to the questions posed, it did seem to be, if you're thinking about school the way school was a decade ago when your kids were there, you don't understand what's going on now, particularly post-pandemic and the challenges the school's facing. And I think maybe down the road, one thing that would be good for us to do is really support more vocally the Tiger Tour or something pre-budget, because I think it really does illustrate, then our boards are getting in there and they're really actually seeing how different things are, and maybe that's just a better advocacy piece we could use.
Yeah, it was a little disappointing that we didn't get any finance committee members to actually join us on those tours.
Right.
So I think that would have, the select board, right? I think it really would have shown them a lot. And I agree with you on that, 100%, but, I also think it's important that as a committee going forward, we stick to our projections.
Yep.
I don't think we can, if we are fortunate enough to get an override, I don't think we can come back in 3 years and say, well, you know what, we had to raise the budget by X% above what we projected.
Yep.
We need more money sooner, and that's what I was trying to express to the finance committee last week is it's on us as a committee, you're supporting it, we get the votes, we get the override, we have to manage our budget to stay within those confines. Because it's not doable to go back, in a time frame shorter than what we're projecting.
I also think the example of the positions we've added over the years separate from the COVID issue, for example, the World Language Program, the Bright Program, the computer science positions. Those are all the new paradigm for education. They're the next. They're what is standard of care now compared to 10 years ago, and I think that just represents that we're progressing with the times and we're adding appropriate positions to the success of our district compared to other districts. And so I was actually really pleased that we piloted, we introduced, and we added those positions in a very deliberate and thought out way. And I think that if we keep doing that, the school committee should continue to support, particularly administrative plans to say, hey, this is a program we think is going to be valuable for the next 5 or 7 years. We should start this with a FEFI's grant, work its way through, support it for a year or two, and then add it to the budget. And that process, I think, is a great way to add to our budget, big picture, long term, as opposed to we think we need this, we think we need that, we need this right here.
Okay.
Is there anything outstanding we owe them that they asked for, data-wise?
No, Cheryl was right on that. So. Okay, so we'll move on to kind of just a quick review of the goals. When we had our agenda planning meeting last night, Kate and I thought that it was important, since we haven't really looked at these goals yet, just to kind of give a quick review of where we are and how we're doing, and talk about maybe some things that we haven't worked on as much as we should have. So the goals are in the meeting folder. Let's see. So the first goal, support rebuilding and maintenance of academic extracurricular programs that were put on hold due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It seems as though I think we're probably as close to back to normal now as we could be, without the social distancing requirements, without the masking requirements. Even with the masking requirements, school sports seem to go off without an issue. Our various other extracurricular activities, the music and arts, were going off without an issue. Any thoughts on this goal? Anyone think we're sort of falling short on this? Or from my perspective, it seems that our school district has pretty much hit it. I mean, we're back on track.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the big ones is that EDP's back and
Right.
thriving with, lots of kids, and that's one that was really missed.
How many kids do we have in EDP now? Roughly?
I believe it's close to 100 in each program enrolled. It's not typically 100 kids there on any given day.
Yeah.
Various days of the week.
That's great. Next is budget. I think we're sort of knee-deep in this right now, working toward an override ask at the May town meeting. We have our override steering committees up and running, and they're doing a great job kind of putting the messaging together and handling all the steps behind the scenes that are required to kind of have this be successful as it was the last go around. They're really using the blueprint from 2015, and I think Kate's on all those calls. I try to get on most of the weekly calls just to listen in on their progress, and they're a really committed group, and they're doing a great job. So I think we're on track with that. Communications, Kate, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. So the short and long-term goals, which were goals of the Communications Committee, we had a goal of increasing general outreach to the community. That was not possible in 2020, 2021. So we've had the AAA had some meet and greets during the fall and into the winter. We did that as well. And then sort of over the winter, I think we pivoted more to thinking about the override. So our outreach has been more internal to school councils, prize meetings. We've been to all those groups to try to be accessible, and those meet and greets weren't super well attended, but we tried. And so I think we'll communications group this summer will regroup and think about other ways we can reach the community better and have that good two-way communication we're looking for. Let's see. And then the other big goal of the communications committee was the bi-monthly newsletter, which we have published 3 issues. We have our 4th coming out next week, and we have one in May. So we are on track with that.
And I think ultimately too, when we get our listening sessions up and running, you know, to kind of kick off the school discussion, that'll, you know, be a good forum to, you know, let folks know what we're doing and really have them be involved. And that's the goal all along of these communications goals, is just to get the community more involved in knowing what we're doing. And you know, that's not always easy, but, you know, we're doing our best to try to be out there. Anything else in communications?
No, social media we could probably be better at. So that's an area we can try to focus on in the next few months.
Okay. The next is our Vision 2030. That's sort of,
I have dropped the ball on that.
Me
So
too.
I just sent an email before this meeting saying, guys, we got to meet. Here, we got a couple months left. We might be able to get something done. I apologize. So I have asked to try to find a date we can meet sometime this month. So
so who's the, that's
it's
two,
you and me and Brian.
Oh, okay.
I
So
didn't see an email. Should I? We'll figure it out.
we'll figure it out. Anyway, so
All right, so we'll have to work toward kind of getting that up and going. And,
Yep.
you know, obviously,
It's negotiations has honestly taken up so much time
Right.
over the past year. Everything else has kind of fallen off, if I'm brutally honest.
Yep.
It's been more meetings than I could have possibly imagined.
no, it's
we're
totally
not done.
understandable.
And we're not done.
Right, that has taken up a lot of time. All right, so that's when we have to work toward.
yep.
And then finally, the MSBA process. You know, I think, again, we're starting slowly. We need to get our listening sessions up and running, and that's obviously been a function of COVID, and that we haven't really scheduled those. It's hard to get people to commit to joining others in a room. So, you know, that's something that we'll work toward and certainly report back on at a future meeting in terms of getting when those will start and what the format will be and that sort of thing. So,
We could incorporate that into Vision 2030 a little bit, maybe just outlining coming into the next year, this is when we'd like to have it done by, you know, just a general something, so at least we hit the ground running. We
Yeah.
can post on social media well ahead of time. These are the dates, these are the times, pick one, pick all, you know, something like that, and really,
yeah. And I think, you know, we need to publicize a timeline for what this whole thing looks like too,
Right.
from listening sessions to SOI to feasibility study to, you know, so everyone is aware how long this process actually takes.
yep.
Okay, any other thoughts or comments on goals so far? Looks like we're doing pretty good in a few. We're struggling with one, but I think that's it's a function of what's going on this year.
Huh?
But we have reasons.
Yeah,
We'll get there, we'll get there.
You know, there's been a lot going on.
COVID and negotiations.
Everything else.
Huh?
Remember that.
What?
Yeah,
A lot
exactly.
going on with goals.
Super.
I was actually just gonna say, I'm thinking about other goals. I'm thinking Chubb's not here, but when do we usually do the operations meeting to get ready for your thing?
Soon.
That's what I was just thinking.
After
When's Chubb coming
the
back?
review, right? I mean,
It's towards the end.
aren't you
Before
like
I'm done.
knee deep in it?
Because he's the chair.
I'd like to do it in May if possible.
May's
Yeah,
when we do
yeah, I think we have it. We have it on the
May or June,
table
right?
for the our May meeting, first meeting in May.
Okay, so operations needs to meet
Yeah.
before that. I'll send out another email because Chubb's not here.
All right, so moving on.
Next.
Yeah, addressing space needs at the elementary schools.
So, so throughout the budget process thus far, you've all heard about the increase in student population, in particular at the preschool K level, and then as a result of the current K, next year's first grade. And so in the budget, we have additional staffing for an additional preschool classroom, kindergarten classroom, and a first grade classroom. Currently, those positions are listed in the budget at the Winthrop School, the Winthrop School budget, and Amy Sullivan had brought those forward. Obviously, it's a, you know, space is the main issue. So we have the potential funding, although the budget hasn't been passed, we have the potential funding for the positions. So the big question is, okay, where do we put this? So looking at different spaces in town, talking with the building principals, continuing conversations with the building principals. I took a look at the bank property that's across the street from Lord Square. That building is currently on the market for $1.3 million.
Is that all?
That's all. Prime real estate.
It's a convenient number, sure.
It's for Cheryl's office.
And really, it could only house one preschool classroom, so it's not going to get us much, and there's no play area or anything like that there. I also looked at the PT office that's across the street from my office on the other side. That building is currently for sale for $500,000. Again, there would be the availability of one classroom space downstairs in that building, and the upstairs would just be offices. Again, it doesn't gain us very much, and there's, again, no play area or anything like that for kids. Winthrop itself has pretty much no space currently available in terms of open areas. We had to move based on the needs of students and the increased population of our EL students. We took over essentially the teacher's room, most of the teacher's room, and that's where the EL teachers are currently, along with some dedicated space for working with some of our students on the autism spectrum. And so there's no empty classrooms there. At the Paul F. Doyon Memorial School, there are some classroom spaces that we're currently using as resource rooms spread throughout the building. So we're taking a closer look at what's available there and what that might look like. Years ago, the preschool classes were at the Paul F. Doyon Memorial School, and I think in 16 or 17 is when we moved them. We moved and had everything over at Winthrop, and then made those budgetary changes.
Is it that long ago?
Yeah, more recent.
think so.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
wasn't it 2 years
2
ago?
or 3 years old.
Yeah.
So, and the other potential area, folks had mentioned town hall, and I spoke with Tony, and that wasn't an option for us. And then somebody else had mentioned one of the EBSCO buildings, but again, we might be able to put the preschools there, but there's no play space or anything like that. We'd have to look at it.
So, having grown up in town, I can tell you from experience that the Boone Hall, which was the basement at the Ascension Church below the basketball court, we had classrooms when I was going to school. The Baptist Church had classrooms, and you could look at Our Lady of Hope as well. They have the whole area where they do Sunday school. And there's a lot of space in all three of those locations. In the churches. And those have been used for public school when as recently as 50 years ago, but still.
1962, when the Government Studies Committee was formed.
Exactly. No, but so early 70s and mid 70s, that's those were in action, and there were kids in all those places, and in Burley School, which is that's all apartments now, as is Chatswell School. But so there were a number of smaller elementary spaces scattered throughout the town in the past, and preschool offers an opportunity to do that,
Right.
because you do have that.
I mean, it would be wonderful if we were able to have a preschool center dedicated unto itself. I think we'd have to be very selective about that space and look at it as more of a permanent space than perhaps a temporary, year or two fix until we see what comes in the pipeline later on.
Father Keys has been very community-oriented at the Catholic Church, and he had all the immunization work done at that same site. And there's a ton of space down there.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to keep in mind the travel, too, of the
Exactly.
special ed.
Yep, I was going to get there.
Sorry. Go.
So there's a number of possibilities. The other piece too is that we have not only the preschool to consider, but the kindergarten. And so the kindergarten is a little bit different in that we don't necessarily know how many or where those kindergarten students are going to be. We have the gray area. And so, asking me right today where the kindergarten class is going to be, I couldn't answer that question. It could very well end up that we have more students that would go to Doyon than to Winthrop. So that's a classroom lingering out there that we can and will have to decide on in the coming month, I'm going to say, as we continue to look at those numbers. So there's a lot of moving parts, is I guess where I'm going with that. There was a study done a number of years ago, I think in the 16-17 school year, that suggested that we should have one preschool location. And I think the following year from that is when we made the move to move the preschool that was at Paul F. Doyle Memorial over to the Winthrop School, just have one location. In addition, we have the transportation concerns for the special needs students, and how far and how we would manage transportation with the bus company and or our vendors. There was a meeting held this afternoon with the program managers, the principals, and Dr. Hedges. And so they're taking a closer look at at potential spaces within the Paul F. Doyle Memorial School to see if we can put the program successfully there. There's playground equipment, there's the facilities that we need. If we can manage the space, I think that would be the likely place for us to consider. Again, we haven't made any decisions yet. We've got to, take a closer look at that.
You got to realize we had 500 kids in each of those buildings.
Understood.
When I started. So it was obviously a different era, maybe more kids per classroom.
Yeah.
But still, we had 500 in both buildings.
So I think, just to summarize it, we're very aware of the issue and the concern, and parents starting to wonder what's going on. We're looking at all the numbers and the need for all three levels, preschool, K, and 1. And we hope to be able to make a decision by, April 1st, like literally within the next couple of weeks, so that we can begin to message that out and make whatever final preparations we're going to need to have that happen in the fall.
Can I ask a question? I can't take credit for this, but somebody in the community suggested once, why don't we get another one of the trailers and dedicate one to, half to an art classroom and half to a music classroom, or half to use our specialists and create space for them that's kids can travel to, and then open up. Is that an option?
We've done that before too.
Yeah. So
maybe not quite
we
that.
talked a little bit about the notion of modulars. Those are over $100,000 to bring on the property, and then you got to plumb them and put electric to them.
Yeah.
Depending on the level, you need the bathrooms right there. You can have kids going from one building to another.
And it's hard to escape those contracts because they charge you a lot to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So you can't just plunk it on for a year and then take it away.
So
We've
that
been
is
stuck
something
with
to
it.
consider.
I liked the idea.
It sounds like Joanne could be a good choice. I don't know if you look into the churches as a option.
There is a lot of classroom space down in Our Lady of Hope.
It's not just underneath the rectory and in the big main area where we had mass during COVID when they were fixing up the church. So there's a lot of space there, and they run all the CCD program through all those classrooms. So they have, blackboards and chairs and rugs and things like that for kids of all ages to gather. So they've done it before.
And their preschool room is in the back
Yeah.
area too, and it's a good sized space. It's actually a nice space back there.
Any other questions for Brian? All right. Okay, so we'll move on to Cheryl, and she'll discuss with us, and we'll vote on transferring additional funds into the stabilization fund. So,
Thank you, Greg. So we had the opportunity to look at the budget for this year as the town needs the numbers for the articles by April 1. So we projected out what we'll be spending for the remainder of the year, and then what we'll have in leftover appropriations eligible to be transferred back to the stabilization fund, should you so vote that. And again, it's a lot of the same reasons as the prior two fiscal years. You know, we have a lot of COVID funding. We ended up with our health insurance giving us a deduction holiday, which we didn't expect, which is like $150,000. And so I'm recommending a vote of $1,330,000 going back to stabilization, which could be subject to change between now and town meeting.
okay. It's a big number.
It's amazing how we keep doing this. Every year when I was, for 15 years, it was like, we need to put a budget freeze on and save $500,000 to get through the year. And every year here, it's like, here's some more money.
I think the difficult part, and I don't know that we would, I can tell you, we wouldn't be having this conversation if we didn't have COVID to deal with. You know, I think, you know, closing down school in March, we saved a lot of money. You know, last year, having, you know, COVID funds available to us saved the district a lot of appropriated funds. You know, this year, similarly, you know, ESSER 3, you know, we put a lot of money in that because it has to be expended. So I think, you know, we wouldn't be in this position had it not been for the additional COVID funds.
I mean, honestly, the great thing about this is you have a lot of stabilization available. But the further away the appropriated budget gets from our actual spending, the more dangerous a situation we are in the future. So it really doesn't change the justification for the override. It just may tack another year on the far end if we're still prudent and lucky. So I don't see it as altering our thinking on the override. I think it just changes maybe the far end of it. Because really this is a preventative or a true stabilization fund, not necessarily anything else.
What are you thinking? Stick with the existing plan or decrease the ask to keep it to 5 years?
I don't see why we decrease the ask, because either way, we're funding a stabilization fund. And this is just a variability in an annual number that gets packed away, and we use it for our prudent purposes. We've got a plan.
Yeah.
Just changing it makes it, well, think about it. 6 years times $200,000 a year equals $1.2 million. So could you do that? Sure. That's 6 years where you're $200,000 off on the year, where you are relative to your other budget. I don't know. I think we could have used that logic for other reasons too, but it's a thought.
Yeah. Any other questions on how?
So, I don't know, I'm torn between asking for a lower number and having it go 5 years, or keep the number we were talking about. And, you know,
Looking at
wouldn't
6.
have the last 6.
And then maybe you have another year like this next year, and then you're looking at 7
Right.
again, which is where we were.
We could promise 6, yeah.
And that's the idea of prudence.
Yeah.
I do think it merits thinking about where families are right now because of COVID, and families whose incomes might have been drastically cut during COVID. And if there is a way for us to cut the number, I get
Well,
the
there is.
argument
I mean,
on
the other
both
one is you could
sides.
say that the state is going to step up and give us more, and we're hoping that comes through.
Well,
That's another way you can have it.
I know, but I'm thinking of the cost to the individual families, and if there's a way, and again, also thinking long-term about other projects, that if there's a way we're showing we're factoring in individual, that we know these things impact households, I think that's an important, I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind. I mean, a lot of families were lucky, a lot of families were really not, and are scared.
Can we just get a motion to accept the return of the funds to stabilization?
Move to accept the return of the funds and vote for them at town meeting to return to stabilization.
Second.
All in favor?
Is that what you wanted?
So, yeah, so I mean, obviously I almost think I'm leaning toward Emily's thoughts on this, and I think, that's one of the issues that was coming up with the FinCom is, people are struggling, let's try not to pass on too much of a tax increase. And then do we put it, the question about do we put it off and wait and see what happens in terms of additional funding, I don't think that's prudent. But I don't know, I'm sort of torn because I agree with you, like overrides are a thing that sort of just the way it is. We're always gonna need overrides under this current funding formula. So do we keep it at 2 and say we're gonna get 6 years, or do we roll it back to 1.8 just to keep it at 5?
What's the difference to the taxpayer?
Do we crunch that number, or does FinCom?
No, that should come from FinCom.
150?
It's like $300 for the 2 million.
I can't hear you.
It was $300 for the $2 million would be $300 per taxpayer a year. So this would reduce that by 20%, 10%,
Yeah,
right? So that's
Yeah.
$280
or $80 a year.
or $270 instead of 300.
Sorry, what was the difference?
$300 per
30.
household, and we reduced it to $270 per household,
10%.
10% reduction.
Are we sure of that $300 number though?
Yeah, I actually,
Oh, okay, all right. Just want to make sure we're not throwing that out there. So, I mean, I think we have to come to a consensus on where we're going because, I think the steering committee is ready to get their messaging out, and we want to make sure that they're providing the correct message to the community. And, we're going to have to answer these questions at bean counting next Saturday with FinCom and explain what we've done, what we're doing with these funds that are going back. Are we changing the number? Are we sticking with it? We just need, obviously, an argument for either one. So, where do we go?
I don't know. I kind of lean towards going with the slightly lower number. It might make a difference in how long the override lasts, but I think it's a gesture that we hear their concerns and we're sensitive. I mean, it's a gesture at least that we're hearing their concerns and the concerns of taxpayers. So that's kind of where I lean.
So have you played it out in our calculator yet?
Yeah, so the 1.8 gets us to 5 years. Yeah. And, I mean, basically, it lowers the ask by 200,000 for next year also. It gets us from the 2.8 to
Yep,
2.6.
and
And so it's,
It's $1.2 million,
Yeah.
I mean, less.
Yeah.
1.3 really, I don't know. Count 2.5%.
But isn't there a chance? I mean, the last override was supposed to get us to 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a chance we could squeak out more like we have with this one,
Well,
right?
Think about
Yep.
that additional stabilization line in the override calculator is because we got a little extra money every year, on
Yeah.
average $300,000 more. This year, we're getting $1.3 million, not $300,000.
So there's a chance we can
And
squeak
in
out more
fact,
than
if the
5.
state kicks in an extra $600,000 a year, we might get even more.
Yeah.
But by demonstrating that we're reliable, we can keep at least, the stabilization and kind of move forward and keep stability in our budget. Because eventually, it always gets eroded by steps and lanes and COLAs and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable to expect, again, we could go beyond the 5 years, and it's about us managing these budget increases year to year. So, I mean, I would lean toward decreasing the ask to 1.8 just to show good faith with the FinCom. And it seems to me like to be the right thing to do. It's easy to defend, and it's easier messaging for the steering committee to get out there and tell folks, look, we have more money to stabilization because of savings due to COVID, and as a result, we're altering our ask to make sure that, we're still sticking to our 5-year plan, and it represents a cost savings to the taxpayer.
Yep.
I think we owe it to people to ask for,
Yeah.
the
What we need.
lowest
Yep.
we
Yeah.
can to get what we need.
The interesting thing is that override we'll actually still be on an annualized basis taking in less from taxpayer funds than we're paying out the very first year after our override. That means our deficit in the calculator is 1.85 or something like that. So we'll bring that up to nothing for next year, but then
Start.
we'll gradually
Draw it
have
down.
more and more of a deficit.
Yep.
$500,000 a year for the next 5 years, and so it'll be $2.5 million in the whole of 5 years, or maybe less. But we'll still, we'll still have a ton of money cash in the bank.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing about this one-time fund
Yeah.
that we get.
Yep. So do we need a motion to alter that amount?
Yeah, because actually I already wrote the warrant article, so I'll need to amend that and send it to Tony, so I
Okay.
need you to vote on that. Yeah.
But we have time to do that, right?
Yeah, I think he needs the exact numbers by April 1st.
Okay.
Yeah, that's always, the bean counting's always before that, so we have one last vetting session to change everything around. So you've got till April 1st
Okay.
just to get through bean counting.
So how do we think this will go over?
Oh, it'll be well
Thank
received.
you.
I think you're not politically incorrect here. You're on target by reducing our number. We'll probably bring people over to doing it this year. But they'll still argue that maybe we can wait another year.
Maybe next year.
Yeah.
That just disadvantages everybody, I think.
But and then the cost to the taxpayer is greater if we do that, which
Yeah, I
we're
mean,
trying
it's-
to avoid.
It's 2.6 next year,
Right.
No,
Right.
There's a pretty clear, not that I want to only focus on the FinCom, so we have to focus on the town, but there's a pretty strong concern in the FinCom that, the school building project is really important. And I think the elementary principals made it very clear how dire things are in those elementary schools. And there's
Yep.
at least, 2 or 3 FinCom members that are very concerned about that. And so getting this override passed to provide a stable budget for a number of years will
Yep.
clear the road for
And
that.
the hope is that we provide a stable budget until the elementary school arrives.
Until what?
The elementary school arrives,
Right.
so that it doesn't,
Yep.
people aren't thinking about all that money that whole time. And with new schools, there's a lot of new funds that come along for one-time expenses in the new buildings, because that new school implies not just a new building, but new computers and new desks and new this and new that. So a lot of that stuff will float some of the capital needs of your district for a little while. You're not sucking at it from old buildings and so forth.
An energy efficiency.
Yeah, that's a marginal benefit, believe it or not. Because all newer things use a lot more power for the technology. All the new buildings will be more energy hogs because they're so much bigger.
All right, so could I get a motion to decrease the override amount from 2 million to 1.8 million?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Any additional thoughts, comments on the override for now?
I do. So again, just in conversations about the override, I think some people are having a hard time separating school building and override, and there's a concern on, I hate that there's still camps, but in both camps, all camps, that people are having a hard time trusting coming together around the override and then losing voice in school building. And I think everybody understands intellectually the difference, and that, the override is to keep our schools where we want them to be. It's to keep our educators in schools. It's to keep a co-teaching model in our elementaries. It's to keep the district moving forward. But I just think maybe for the steering committee, or that is something, you know, the hope is that the override's a unifying issue, and that it in no way marginalizes the discussion that still needs to be had surrounding school buildings, location, all those things. One, it really needs to lay the groundwork for open-mindedness in the next thing. And again, I think everybody gets it intellectually, but there's still this like residual, well, if I jump whole hog into this issue and supporting it, I don't want to see the door slammed in my face just because I can't do it for the next thing because I feel differently. So I don't know if that's something to be addressed or like strategically discussed or really acknowledged or really made a transparent part of the conversation, but it is something, again, it's sort of transcending what you want the school building to look like, and it's held by both camps, so.
Well, I think that's why, and we talked about this, I think, with the steering committee, and it's going to be on us to create it, is to come up with that timeline so that everyone is aware how long the process takes, and voting or helping with the override and supporting the override this year, and then advocating for whatever school alignment you want are on totally different paths, And I think from the people that I talk to, I think there's a sense that it's, in some cases, one or the other, and then all of a sudden the school vote's going to be next year, and we're going to have to make all these decisions, and you're going to be voting on it again. I mean, this is, several years plus out before we'll even get to that point. So again, I think we need to make it clear what that sequencing looks like in terms of the different steps.
To me, it's very separate because this is supporting the schools we have and the programs we have. To me, they're like completely divorced from each other. It's like, that's a whole, we'll get to that. This is now. So.
But I see your point, Emily. They're funding different things, right? The education versus the building, but they're, to the taxpayers, they're both going to affect them significantly. And it's hard to, I think that's one of the hard things, because all these things are coming to a head that we have to pay for in town. It's hard to think about them in a vacuum because they're all going to affect our pocketbook, and they're all, the messaging is going to be tricky, but it's just as important that the townspeople be open-minded than that the school committee is open-minded.
Yeah, it's more.
It's all of our decision.
Yeah, I think it's like the fear of the unknown. Everybody. The interesting thing is, all these people are passionate supporters of the schools. Every single one of them. So that's not really it's really just the wanting to take the leap and then wanting to trust that the collaboration is going to roll into the next project versus doors being
Everybody back
slammed,
to their
opinions being
camps.
shut off.
Up to the people.
No, I know, but I think it doesn't hurt to acknowledge we're being mindful of that and or we haven't been mindful of that and we need to be more whatever it is. I have not been any help whatsoever on multiple things tonight, but it's just something.
Yeah,
we can't think about them really separately.
They are to some extent, but the fear of the unknown. I think it's the unknown relative to not funding the school budget adequately is known. We've been through it. Right. What good are new schools if we don't have the teachers or the program offerings to put in them? So granted, I can appreciate that there's a lot of unknown and maybe some anxiety about the school location and the layout, whatever is going to ultimately happen from that. But again, if we don't fund our budget, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
I'm kind of excited by that. And I may be completely delusional, but I'm excited by the prospect of some healing around this. People coming together, working together, seeing in each other again that we're on the same team, and maybe it could heal some things And if we handle it correctly going forward, then with the listening sessions,
Right.
maybe the beginning of some healing, which would be such a wonderful thing.
Yes.
I think too that, having been through the building project before and all of what we went through, I think that folks realize that there is a significant process to the whole thing, and lessons learned. We're not even going to be looking to submit an SOI for anything, 1 building, 2 buildings, renovation, whatever. We're not submitting an SOI for anything until the entire community is on the same page.
Right.
Because otherwise, we're completely wasting our time, because MSBA has all but said, my words, don't bother coming back until you guys know what you want,
Yep.
after the last situation that we were in. So I think that we will have the opportunity through the listening sessions, a lot's changed in the 6 years since that vote, to have those conversations and figure out what we want to do as a community before we submit an SOI and attempt to get back in the process. Because there's no guarantee that the first year we put in an SOI, they're going to say, oh yeah, welcome back.
Right.
It could be several years of that till we're accepted.
So there may be a backdoor way to kind of build community around this. Does the administration still have some value in the concept of a go to K-2, 3-5 model? And if they do, is that something where you could create an administrator-led subcommittee that would happen over the course of next year, the school committee, community members from both buildings, administrators, to sit down and evaluate the idea of whether we're better served as a community with a K-2, 3-5, in the existing structure that we have. The idea being that it gives an opportunity for the leaders, both parent and administrative leaders in the 2 buildings, to consider different models to deliver the education. And it may allow them, if we do choose to move that direction, to have a educational framework or to build that transition plan. So that transition plan is going and maybe even happening before we make the move. And so people come to terms with the fact that we're all one big community, maybe in 2 different buildings, or maybe in 1 building, but we're all one community that's working towards the same goal. So the concept would be, it would be a separate process from the SOI process from the listening sessions. That would be purely administrative-led, conceptual, the idea of evaluating a K-2 or pre-K to 2 versus in 3-5 model versus a K-5, K-5. Having been on that subcommittee for an entire year, 15 years ago, the administration very clearly, the administrators at the elementary schools very clearly came down upon the idea that we need 2 neighborhood K-5 schools, and that's the best for children. And that's what all the literature told us. And that's what they presented to us over the course of multiple presentations. But that may have changed over the years, and it may be an opportunity, I think, to carve out a non-biased, non-sectarian way to evaluate schools in a different format. I don't know. Just a thought for one of these self-dissolving, self-destructing 1-year subcommittees that goes off into a back room and comes back in April with their findings and their recommendations.
And certainly,
It's a great
head in
idea.
that direction and look at that, something that we have been talking about
course.
as an administrative team.
But
And
this
things
is
have
this is-
changed drastically since
This is a
15 years
listening
ago.
session that's not a listening session. Because you can cherry pick 5 or 6 parent leaders who would be valuable voices in the room. And you can have your administrators, you can have a couple school committee members who are passionate about it. And they can disappear and come back with their recommendation. And then you've got a basis for a supportive group to bring that, whatever that is, forward. Expressed as a building maybe. But really, it's come out of an academic consideration of what's best for kids.
Okay, that's a great
Which is really
idea.
what should drive this.
Yeah.
What?
Which is really what should drive this.
Yeah.
Because not like where we're going to build the building. That's not the idea. It's what's best for
Yeah.
kids.
That's a good idea.
And the fallback is, okay, you come out of that, and they say, gee, we really think K-2, 3-5 is the best thing. You can start moving that direction and actually switch around the schools in a year or two, right? If you have an academic preparation for that, you start professional education around that. Or you say K-5 is still the best. We're like, well, good. That's how we're going to set up our new building project, and we're going to have, 2 houses that are K-5 or whatever, and however it's going to be, or maybe we'll have 2 buildings. But whatever it is, at least you can have an academic justification that's almost on a parallel route, separate from whether you actually build new schools. Whether you build or not, you're going to change what happens based on that.
I love that idea.
I like it.
But do we run the risk of then having that a whole year go by and they come back and say, K-5, they can go to school?
Well, that's what we did.
Right.
That's what we did. We were thinking about changing it. We chose not to. Because, and honestly, the real reason is because the leadership of those committees was heavily for K-5. Our principals were like, K-5 is the best. Fewer transitions, ownership, kids love their school, they're there for years, parents have multiple kids in that school, that's the best. And maybe that, if that's true, maybe that helps speak to one school too. So you just have to, it'll help you structure your one school or your 2 schools, however you build it.
And Middleton and Topsfield both have K through 2.
That was our example back then.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. I do worry and am concerned about the community and the parent voice in all of that. Because, one of the things that we were accused of the last time is not listening to the public in terms of the design and the configuration of the building.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that parent voice is heard, and taken into consideration.
But to some extent, that takes it out of this room and it moves it to another room where they can have civil discussions as individuals and as a community, talk about different subjects every month for 3 or 4 or 5 months, come up with recommendations, and then report back as a subcommittee and then bring it back with a final recommendation. That because you don't want to be involved in all the minutia of that discussion. You want to get the product.
What about asking the school councils to ask 2 parent representatives? That way, it's not administrator handpicked. It's actually community-driven parent representatives.
And remember factions, right? More people mean less likelihood that a faction carries the day. So you might need 3 or 4 parents from each building, and the administrator and the school committee member.
Yeah. But I think letting the communities pick the representatives, because we have gotten in trouble before when it's been administrative picked. You can't win, but but maybe we can learn from how we've tried it before. And school councils, like, we would like 2 or 3 representatives from your community to
It
work on
doesn't
this.
necessarily have to be the people on the school
No.
council, but just parents that have students in the building.
Yep.
And again, separate from the building process.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like it, because then the educators there should be an educator, parent driven.
It's administrator. And educator, but administrator. That's.
We got that. But thank you.
All right, anything else on the override? All right. Superintendent administrative report.
All right. Well, it's been well over a month now since I reported to the school committee. I missed mid-February meeting, and we had vacations and stuff. Since our last meeting that I was present, most of the focus has been on the budget and the presentations to the FinCom and wrapping up some of the negotiations. At this point, we just have the paraprofessional staff contract yet to negotiate. All the others, the other 5 have been settled. Over the last month, I continued to work on my goals, attending faculty and school council meetings in each of the schools, working with the ELL staff in program development, and meeting with the principals. I've also spent considerable time reviewing all of the documents for the upcoming comprehensive district review. I'd like to spend a few minutes just talking about that process and what the end result will be. To date, we've uploaded and I've reviewed over 400 individual documents. that have been sent off to them, everything from maps of the buildings to staff lists to curriculum documents, scope and sequence documents for the different curriculums, daily schedules, weekly schedules, common planning time, you name it, they're asking for it. So it's well over 400 documents, not pages, but documents that we've uploaded to them. We're now in the process of organizing the actual site visit that's scheduled for the week of April 11th. They'll be doing classroom observations, they'll be doing interviews with various constituent groups, and reviewing additional documentation on site. The comprehensive review is based on the DESE district standards and indicators. The 6 standards are leadership and governance, human resources and professional development, financial and asset management, curriculum and instruction, assessment, and student supports. Under each standard, there are a number of indicators. For example, under leadership and governance, they'll be looking at school committee governance. We had to upload all of our school committee meeting minutes for the last year. They'll be looking to do some interviews. Looking at district and school leadership, district and school improvement planning, and our budget development. In the area of curriculum, they'll be looking at the curriculum selection and use, classroom instruction, and student access to coursework. So we're going to be reviewing our policies, our curriculum review cycle that we have in the district put together, and all the various planning documents that we have. I view it as a good way to step back and take a closer look at all of our systems. As I've indicated in the past, this is the first time that Ipswich has had this done. We've had individual program reviews for our special education programs. We have one that's going to be happening for our EL population or EL program this year. But this is a district-wide one. And when I spoke with folks at DESE, I said, "Can I see the report from the last time?" And there isn't one. We've never had a review done. So there's 13 other districts being reviewed this year from across the Commonwealth. Following the on-site, the American Institute for Research has partnered with DESE, and that's who will be doing the on-site. They'll produce a report for our use that'll give an overview of their process, identify areas of strength and areas where we can improve. They'll also provide us with the links to the resources that we need in order to make the suggested improvements to our programs, whatever they may be. Initially I was skeptical when we first got the phone call and the email saying that we're going to be reviewed this year. I'm thinking, what more can they throw at us? We're at that point, the middle of a pandemic. We've got 2 brand new administrators in the district. We're in crisis survival mode here, and now we've got to change gears. But as the year has gone on and things have settled out a little bit, and we looked at what they were asking for, it was all documents that we had in the district in various places. So teachers shared their documents, the administrators shared things. We reviewed them all and uploaded everything to their website. So I think at the end of the day, it'll be a good process to have gone through, and it'll give us some clear direction moving forward as far as where our strengths are. I think we're doing a great job in a lot of areas, but it's also going to identify areas where we need to beef things up, and that's okay. Reviewing reports online from districts that have had this done before, there's always room for improvement. They always find things that, in different areas that you're going to want to address, even if it's just to meet what DESE says you should be doing. In some of our conversations and looking at the types of documents they're asking for example, a lot of it is very traditional. And so, Tracy mentioned, they're not looking for anything as far as our place-based learning and our project-based learning and all of the cool stuff that we're doing. And so how is that going to shake out? And we hope that the people that are coming in to do the review are up to speed on all of those types of things. So, also, so I think that wraps that piece up. We'll see April 11th. That week they're here a couple of days. I'll be in touch. We're trying to figure out whether they're going to contact school committee members or if we have to let them know, who's around that day because they're here during the school day, and how many they're going to want to talk to. And then we'll go from there. I don't know how long the turnaround time is on their report. We met as a leadership team earlier in the week and sent out a list of questions back to AIR, but our main contact person is out of the office this week, so hopefully we'll go next week and get an answer from them. In other news, I'm happy to report that we're beginning to make end-of-year plans, including our graduation, Crane Beach Day, our Memorial Day celebration, Juneteenth, and the last days of school. And we'll have more information on those events forthcoming. Little teaser, we're looking at graduation being outside on the field potentially. Be a game day or the day before decision as far as the rain and the weather, but we're going to try to do it outside. So we'll change that tradition up a little bit from having it traditionally inside. We've always had it in the two COVID years, 3 COVID, 2 years. Two each. Yeah, 2 each. And then the last day of school is scheduled to be Tuesday, the 22nd?
It's
21st?
My daughter's a senior.
Now.
So barring any more snow days,
What is it? Tuesday the 21st?
yep, the last day of school will be Tuesday, the 21st. Because Juneteenth is celebrated on the Monday, so it'll be a holiday because it's a federal holiday. Graduation is scheduled for Saturday, June 5th is graduation, Sunday, yes.
Yep.
That's when we do Sunday. I'm looking at Saturday, but yes, Sunday. And then Green Beach Day, again, these are tentative dates. I hesitate to even give them out. Because
Keep it out.
All over Facebook by the time I leave.
Oh, yeah. It already is.
June 16th we're looking at for Green Beach Day, with a rain date of the 17th. 21st will be the last day of school, and May 27th will be the Memorial. We're trying to organize the Memorial Day celebration. That is it for that piece. And then the final piece, COVID numbers. It's nice to bump this down to the bottom of my talking points instead of it being the talking point. We continue to have low rates. Prior to the break, we had cases in the high teens there for a couple of weeks, seeing it trickle down. Since the break, that number's hovered between, a couple of weeks ago, we had 0 cases to report, and then this Wednesday, from last Thursday to this Wednesday, I reported 6 cases. So we had 4 at the middle school and 2 at Winthrop. And it was maybe 3 families. So they were somewhat isolated. So we continued to participate in the weekly testing program, although we're starting to see more and more parents opt out of the weekly testing. That'll continue until I anticipate April vacation, and then the state will probably end it unless we start to see a spike in cases. But certainly we're not seeing that yet. Parents, of course, and staff can opt out at any time, but they have been reporting positive cases. In fact, I think 4 of the 6 cases, I stand corrected, 4 of the 6 cases, I think about it, were Sunday night tests, and 2 of the kids were asymptomatic.
So we don't have anyone at Beverly Hospital with COVID right now.
Wow.
We had 1 for most of last week.
Wow.
So the numbers have really just dropped right off.
I think we still have 4, but none in the ICU.
Yeah.
I'm just looking. And I think they're going to stop reporting on it because the numbers are so low, which is great.
Yeah, it's largely gone. It's
Just
amazing.
noticed this is the first night you're not wearing a mask.
Yeah, because I always considered that I would be bringing COVID everywhere I went because I'm in the hospital every day. All of a sudden, I'm wearing a mask every day still in the hospital and in the office, but the risks just aren't there like they were. So I just don't feel like I'm bringing risks to the
We still have them on my floor, so I'm still masking.
Oh, I mean, if that's the case, we'll be wearing them for a while in the medical world, I think.
So that's all she wrote for this week. Continue to watch the numbers, and hopefully we continue to watch them go down. I know I've got a couple of parents who are giving me a hard way to go about reporting the COVID numbers every week, but I'm going to continue to do that because I think it's the right thing.
But they don't want to hear, they don't want you to.
It'll be good when it's 0.
Right.
Okay. Subcommittee working group and liaison reports. Communications, we met.
We did. We met last week. We will not get the newsletter out this week, as I said. We'll get it out next week. We have a few topics. We're going to do a piece on the override, a piece on the budget, sort of summary, highlights of the budget for next year, but sort of things we're potentially adding. What else are we doing? I was going to ask Caroline to write something. She's not here, so I'll email her. So I will circulate that by email to you all when it's drafted, with enough time to get it. When would you like it, Laura, for a Friday send out?
Thursday afternoon or Friday morning.
It's that quick to put it into Smart? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, one other thing we did talk about, I had been hearing some stuff on the MASC listserv about remote participation for school meetings. Some other towns are having sort of like a hybrid model similar to what the select board does, so I thought we should talk about it. We did talk about it. We came to the conclusion we don't have the capacity to do it in this room technology-wise currently. There are some things on order that we're waiting for that might give us that capacity, but we talked about it and we feel like, accessibility to our meetings isn't an issue because we are either streaming them on YouTube or they're available on local TV, so people can always tune in, and we, prefer to meet in public, so we decided to continue as we are meeting live, and people are always welcome to come. That's it. I just thought it was worth talking about.
Budget, we met really just in preparation for the budget presentations, nothing since. Athletics, I know you guys met last night, right?
Yeah, we met last night. It was a good meeting. We once again talked about 8th grade waivers and the implications for the school. And a parent came and talked a bit about that. We talked about numbers. We talked about the success of a variety of programs and how we can build programs by having coaches maybe do more clinic-based stuff and getting more involved with youth programs. That's about it. Anything else you can remember, Brian?
No. Spring sports registration closes tonight.
Numbers were good for spring sports. We have good participation.
I think the bulk of the conversation was around the 8th grade waivers, specifically, but more generally, the state of youth sports in Ipswich. And, I I think, a national trend that suggests that kids just aren't coming out and playing team sports like in the numbers that they used to. And so, what is that? How does that translate to Ipswich? How do we change that paradigm so that we have more kids coming out again and participating and build our programs? So there's a lot of ideas floating around, but
It's a tough job.
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
So are we doing 8th grade waivers to certain?
Selectively, I think, would be the answer. So an example would be if you have a sport that has a JV and varsity level,
Yeah.
and you project that you're going to have adequate numbers for both JV and varsity, there's not a big reason to do waiver programs. A lot of 8th grade parents are very interested in waiver programs because it gives their kids an opportunity to play maybe at a higher level. There's some misconception that kids will be able to, in 8th grade, play for the varsity team. But if it's a JV team, they have to play for the JV team. They can't play for the varsity team. And there's an idea that it should always be open for everybody because a lot of 8th graders may be as good as 9th or 10th graders. But it does take away from the success and the validity of middle school interscholastic programs. And it takes away from maybe the ability of high school level kids to participate when they'd be competing against the 8th graders. So there's some concern.
One of the pieces, significant piece that you just mentioned of misinformation out there is that regardless of how good a 7th or 8th grader may be, they cannot replace, in other words, we can't cut high school students to have those positions filled by 8th graders. So unless there's a need, unless you have a hard time filling out a roster, 8th graders cannot be part of that. And that's very clear in the MIA rules and the paperwork around waivers. But to your point, Q, there's a lot of folks that feel that it should be just open and everybody's competing together, and that's
And you want your kid to have a productive and successful year. If you're a very, very talented 8th grade athlete, you're often on par with high school athletes.
Yeah.
And you're looking around going, what am I playing with these kids that don't even know how to dribble a basketball and I can score every point in the game every week?
Yeah.
And that's the frustration for the kids.
Yeah, that's the other side of the equation. Yeah.
And do other towns have other philosophies than us, which maybe makes it hard because they might have other.
So the only exception would be if you have a single principal for both your middle and high school, then they can pull from that entire student body for their high school team. So where you may have seen 8th graders playing, that would be typically just Georgetown High School, because there's an 8th grade around, maybe Rockport as well, that has a single principal for 6 through 12. And in that situation, you can pull younger kids up to high school varsity. Otherwise, you can't, unless you don't have JV. For example, in softball, where you can jump right up. And there are only a select few sports that need the numbers, but they're out there. I mean, gymnastics, the co-ops would be like gymnastics, hockey, but then football struggles with numbers right now. Basketball has struggled with numbers in the past, not so much now, but it has. And a lot of people are interested in lacrosse and other sports like that. But those numbers have been adequate. Field hockey.
We had any other subcommittees or liaison groups?
Policy met, and we are still working our way through section I. So when we have, are we gonna wait till we have all of them?
We have
Yeah.
a few more to review.
Yeah.
I think we approved a number of them at the last meeting. They're not in tonight's packet. They'll be for the next meeting.
So they have to go on the agenda, right, if we're voting them?
I'm
Sorry?
They have to go on the agenda if we're going to vote them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And STEAM team had an all-day meeting on Tuesday at Town Hall, getting ready for the STEAM showcase. Very exciting. So I think they have 25, approaching 30 participants. And they didn't want to pack it because it's the first one back since COVID, but people are very excited. So it will be May 4th. So
May
of course
May
the
4th is an
kids,
appropriate Steve day.
Yeah,
yes, the kids wanted to go with May the 4th be with you.
that's cute.
And there will be students in Stormtrooper gear to assist you if you are lost or in need of help.
The
Nice.
runner-up day was Pi Day, and that's already passed, so they had to go with May the 4th.
So like on the list of things they had there, like rent costumes. I'm like, I like
Aw.
this. This is gonna be fun.
Do you have a flyer or anything I could forward to try to get someone from EBSCO?
Oh yeah, I can totally. I'll send that to you tonight.
Okay, anyone else? Liaison reports? I know we had IEF last week, but unfortunately I had to miss it because of the budget hearings. So,
We were supposed to do race and equity, but we had to cancel because of the budget hearings.
Because of the budget hearings.
Yeah.
Because of the budget
Back
hearings.
to busy week. Budget hearings.
Yeah.
Those were a lot of budget hearings.
Okay, new business? None? Vouchers and bills, we all set with that? Okay. Consent agenda. Okay. So move the Ipswich School Committee to accept the following. We have a bunch of meeting minutes to accept. Open session meeting minutes from Thursday, January 6th, 2022. Open session meeting minutes from Thursday, January 20th, 2022. Open session meeting minutes from Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022. Open session meeting minutes from Thursday, February 3rd, 2022. Open session meeting minutes from Thursday, February 10th, 2022. Open session meeting minutes from Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. And open session meeting minutes from Monday, February 28th, 2022. A $500 donation from Zeno's Roast Beef for the racing team to be deposited into the high school gift account. A $500 donation from Gregory Insurance for the racing team to be deposited into the high school gift account. A $1,000 donation from EBSCO to help fund the electric vehicle charging station at the high school to be deposited into the high school gift account. And a $2,500 donation from the Ipswich Education Foundation to help fund the electric vehicle charging station at the high school to be deposited into the high school gift account. Can we get a second?
Second?
All in favor? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So, second?
All in favor? All right, thanks, everybody.
Happy
Thank
St.
you,
Patrick's Day.
Ipswich.
So, my daughter Bridget
Mics are
bought the
still
house
hot.
next door,
Wait, which one?
Michael Fay's house, the one that was overgrown.
The empty one. Oh,
How
psych!
crazy is that?
Oh my God, that's so cool. This is what's happening in the neighborhood now.
Yeah, everyone's buying
You're
it.
the third family to have grandparents.
My daughter just bought the house.